Good afternoon, everyone. So, I want to talk about yet another Russian nonsense claim. I mean, they seem to come out weekly. But this time I'm talking about the Russian Ministry of Defense's claim to Western nations that Ukraine is going to use a dirty bomb in its own territory and then frame it as a Russian attack. And yet again, I just can't fathom how fucking stupid Russia is. And how equally, if not more stupid, people who support Russia in this endeavor are. I mean, honest to God, it's unbelievable they are a functioning country at this point. But really, I guess it's pretty easy to run a country when all you have to do is dig oil out of the ground and then sell it. Anyways, I'm getting off topic. So let me talk about this dirty bomb. And I want to talk about what it is and what it isn't and what Russia is saying and kind of discuss that. So first and foremost, a dirty bomb is not a nuclear weapon. They're completely different. A nuclear weapon uses explosive energy to split atoms, causing a nuclear reaction that is hugely energetic, causing massive explosion. That's the very, very simplified version. I'm sure a lot of engineers out there are like, Jesus Christ. But anyways, what a dirty bomb is it uses a conventional explosion to disperse radioactive material across an area using the blast. It pushes everything out. And the point of a dirty bomb is to contaminate an area with radioactive material. Unfortunately, with regard to a dirty bomb, some people can ingest some of the material, whether breathing it in or swallowing it, and they probably will need some medical treatment or some monitoring. But it's very few will actually get sick, and probably zero will die from such radioactive material. In fact, more people probably will die from the explosion that took place than the actual radiation. The issue is explosions are really inefficient ways to spread material, and it doesn't create as much death and destruction. Well, the explosion itself causes destruction, but the radiation doesn't cause as much death as people would think. They think radiation and they think immediate death. That's not necessarily how it works. There just isn't enough radioactive material in a dirty bomb to cause immediate death on a large scale. It's not like a chemical or biological weapon. Now, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security says that a dirty bomb would really only deliver the equivalent of a dental x-ray's worth of radiation to people in the vicinity of the fallout. Now, they go on to talk about how radioactive material is very rock-like. So when you destroy it, it doesn't vaporize and you breathe in radioactive vapors. It turns into smaller pieces of pebbles and sand. Now, there's a potential you could get radiation sickness over time if you unfortunately breathed in the sand pebbles before they hit the ground. But in general, everyone in the vicinity wouldn't even get sick. And you really can just limit your exposure if you are in the vicinity of a radioactive blast like that by just leaving. You just walk away, and the further away you get, the less exposed you are. And in fact, people who are in buildings probably won't have any radioactive effects whatsoever. And that's just the reality of it. Like I said before, dispersing material in a way to try to get people to breathe it in and ingest it is just incredibly inefficient. At worst, people in the vicinity will have to throw their clothing away, and the cleanup would be pretty expensive because that radioactive material would linger, so they would have to get rid of it, and that would be expensive and time consuming. But again, there's professionals that can do that, especially in Ukraine. The idea that Russia is positing is that they could use a nuclear power plant such as Chernobyl or Zaporizhia and destroy it. Well, those are even more lousy dirty bombs because the reactors are covered by feet of concrete and steel. The destructive power of an explosion needed to disperse radioactive material, and often these are underground as well, would be more effective than the radioactive material being ejected. The death and destruction would come from the concussive and blast power of the bomb more so than any radiation effect. So with that in mind, and you'd have to think that Russia understands this as well, why is Russia doing this? Why are they talking about a dirty bomb? Well, for two reasons. The first is the psychological effect. When people hear dirty bomb, they think terrorism, they think radiation, and people getting radiation sickness and dying. And like I just said, that's just not necessarily the case. But number two is because Russia is in a desperation mode. They need the West to turn on Ukraine. So they just lie as if we don't have phones and internet and satellites to verify these lies. It's a tactic that they've used for a century, and it hasn't changed. And it just blows me away that they continue to think that just overtly lying about things like this is going to work, because it never has. And as we become more aware of our surroundings through technology, it's not going to ever work again. But this isn't the first time. Russia's done these types of things before. These kind of blame Ukraine that and then say that Ukraine's going to do it and blame us, and it's a false flag attack. In April, General Kirilov, the head of the Russian CBRN, which is Chemical, Biological, Radiation, and Nuclear Forces, talked about various scenarios that Ukraine could have in the next 6 months. Now, this is based back in April. He said that Ukraine could use a chemical or biological weapon, and then accuse Russia of doing something like that. They could covertly use low quantities of radioactive material or weapons of mass destruction for battlefield gains. I don't know how you conduct low quantity WMD operations, but that's what he says. And then finally he says that they could just openly use a weapon of mass destruction on the battlefield. 6 months later, none of that shit happened. And this wasn't he just didn't say this out of the blue. This is a constant narrative. In June, the Russian Ministry of Defense said that Ukraine was going to use chemical weapons in Odessa and then blame Russia. In July, the Russians claimed that the Ukrainians are preparing chemical provocation at Donetsk and Mykolaiv and Kharkiv. None of those things happened. None of them. And the list could go on. It's like Russia doesn't think we have the ability to see through their bullshit. And in reality, when it comes to Ukraine, par for the course is whatever Russia says, the opposite happens. And we all know that. But Lieutenant General Kirilov says that, and he just said this in the last few days, that Ukraine plans to detonate a dirty bomb or a low-powered nuclear warhead. Like, those were the two things. And he said them like they're the same. They're not. A low-powered nuclear weapon or low-yield nuclear weapon is not even remotely close to a dirty bomb. And it's weird that the head of their CBRN forces combine those things. And I think he did it for shock value, not necessarily because he's dumb, but who knows? It could be either one, but a dirty bomb and a low-yield nuclear weapon are not even remotely the same in their function and their mechanisms and their outcomes, etc. He talks about organizations within Ukraine having the capability, such as the Eastern Mining and Enrichment Plant or the Institute for Nuclear Research and the Ukrainian Academy of Sciences. But the reality is a lot of these places that are under Ukrainian control still are monitored by the International Atomic Energy Agency. So it's the IAEA sees what's going on, and it's an international body. So it's not like Ukraine can just start sneaking material out and using it as weapons. Where weapons-grade material can be snuck out or where radioactive material can be used is in Russia, who is not being monitored by the IAEA. So they can use this and then say Ukraine did it, but Ukraine did it to blame us. It's a stupidly complicated plan. I mean, the uranium or whatever radioactive material they would need doesn't exist in quantities that are easily accessible, so they'd have to use like hospital grade radioactive material, which wouldn't be picked up on monitoring equipment when it's moved, but would be picked up on monitoring equipment when it's exploded. And we're not dumb. We know the difference between certain types of radiation, nuclear material for power plants, for medical, etc. And like I said, it's just a ridiculously complicated plan that we're all seeing through. Now, regardless of how dumb this plan is, even if Russia were to detonate this dirty bomb, and I just want to reiterate this, the blast would kill more people than the radiation would, and the only thing that sucks is they'd have to clean it up, and people would have to throw away their clothes. That's it. It would be purely psychological, and it would be just another reason that we need to declare Russia a terrorist organization, because this is something Al-Qaeda or ISIS would do, not a supposedly functioning world government.